Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And the point of this video is to talk about ES6 module syntax. Okay, so first let's just kind of get the idea of the status quo. Okay, so basically let's create some files. So new file, app.js, just your standard, hey, this is my application's JavaScript file. And then a new file, our index.html. So basically, up until before pre-ES6, before ECMAScript 6, sort of a very big shift and changes in JavaScript. It's been several years since ES6 is released, but certain things that ES6 brought to the table are still things that are still becoming sort of normalized or part of the JavaScript culture today. So before ES6, the way, if you had your JavaScript file, the way you would include it is you would do this, HTML. So you'd have your HTML, and then you would have a script tag. And the script tag would just link to your app.js. But let's say you wanted to bring in a bunch of other libraries, or you want to split up your code into multiple files, so that way you didn't have your entire JavaScript in one file. You would have to put it all in a script, each file in a script tag, and you have to make sure you put them in the right order, so one file doesn't refer to a file that's in another, or a variable that's in another file. So this was kind of a pain, okay? And that's kind of annoying. So what happened is that in ES6, they came out with a syntax to allow you to break up your JavaScript in lots of files without having to necessarily, worry about putting a bunch of script tags in your code. Cool. And the thing is that a lot of nowadays, when you use bundlers like Webpack, Rollup, Parcel, they let you use that ES6 syntax when working in those bundlers, and those bundlers will actually just go in there, look at all those exports and those imports, and then will bundle up your code. That's why they're called bundlers. And what they do is, instead of you really actually having a lot of different files, it takes all your different JavaScript files and turns it into one giant hard to read file, but it works, and it can be very efficient depending what your settings are. And then that way you just have this one file that's just kind of there. It's very neat, but you could just use ES6 modules right out of the gate. But it is a little bit different. It does require some understanding of some nuances. So first off, how would I change the way I do my script tag? So that's the first big change. Instead, now I have to do, I think it's type module. Okay, type module. And that tells JavaScript in the browser that when you run this JavaScript file, to think of it as a module and apply sort of ES6 module syntax and thinking and whatnot. Cool. So now basically the way that works, so let's say I want to create a file, new file. Let's see here, new file, and we'll call this data.js. Now let's say all I want to do here is just save different pieces of data. Okay. Now let's say I'm just going to save I'm going to save all my pieces of data in one object. So I'm going to say here, it would be like export default, since this is the only thing that's going to be in this file. So I'm going to, and the thing is that if something is not exported, I can't bring it in somewhere else. So I got to export it. When I say export default, I don't have to name it. I don't have to declare it. I can just say, here's the data. So I can be like export default and just put in my data like here, hello. And hello is going to equal hello world. Okay. So since I specifically use export default, when I want to bring it into my app.js to use, I would just do import, and then I can give it whatever name I want. So we'll import data from, and then I put the name of the file, /data.js. And if you've worked with React, this is probably very familiar, because technically when you use a create React app, it is using Webpack as its bundler, and Webpack will let you use ES6 module syntax. But again, the difference is you're not actually using it as modules. It's just reading all those imports and exports and again bundling it into one file. Here we're actually going to have it run as multiple files because we're not going to put it through a bundler like Webpack. But basically, again, when there's only one default, there's a default export, I don't have to worry about naming it. I can name it whatever I want because it knows whatever's coming out of this, it's going to assume I'm bringing in whatever the default is. And there can only be one default per file. So theoretically, I'm bringing in that hello world variable and I'm calling it, or that object called data. So now I can do this, console.log data.hello. Cool. Now let's run this. So let's go. Now if I do this, show in file manager, and I just open it up in the browser as a file, it's not going to work because module syntax doesn't work that way. So it's not like your traditional JavaScript file that I could just open up in the browser and it would just work. So if I hit Control-Shift-I, so I'm going to see an error. It's going to be like, "What? What's going on?" To fix this, I have to run an actual, it has to be run through a web server. So if you have npm, that's pretty easy. Okay, so let me just open up my terminal. So if you have npm, you can probably download either, you can do an npm I, or like a global install of HTTP client. I think is one of them. Not this. I usually generally use Light Server is the other one. Light Server, and then that'll install it globally, and you can literally spin up a web server in any folder you want. Okay, and it'll just serve files out of that folder. I already have it installed globally, so I don't have to worry about that. So I can just do this Light Server, and it'll just run a server right out of that folder. Oh wait, this is the wrong thing. So let me running it out of the wrong file. That's going to serve my PHP files. What I want to do is do it here. So let me open up my terminal. Light Server. There it goes. Spins up a server, opens it up. Okay, let's open up our console. And we see hello world. Okay, and it's looking for favicon. I couldn't find it. Not sure where I referred to favicon, but probably was in my boilerplate code. No. Oh no, that's the wrong file. Let's see. Take a look at my boilerplate index.js. Yeah. No, I was just looking for favicon. Couldn't find it. But you see, it did run hello world. Why? Because hello world is not the only JavaScript. Sorry, I keep going to the PHP thing. The only JavaScript tag that I have here is just the app.js. But the modules then go inside app.js. They say, oh, you import data from data.js. Well, I don't see a variable here called data, but you did tell me that the default thing to export here is this object here. So we're just going to assign that to data, and now I have access to data. Okay, nice. So that's one way to do it. Okay, now what if I want to have multiple things in this file? Okay, more than one thing. So then, okay, there's a couple different ways I can do this. So let's see here. I export hello. So in this case, you do have to declare it. So it'd be like export const hello equals hello world. Export const goodbye equals goodbye world. Cool. So now those two variables are exported. And now when I go here, okay, I'm going to change my import. So I'm not longer importing, there's no default, so it's not, I can't just put it in data. There's two ways I can do this. I could import all by putting in the dot, but I have to tell it like where am I going to store all of these things that it's exporting. So I can just do it as data. So that means import everything, and then it just takes everything that's exported here and creates an object. So there's going to be an object with a hello property and a goodbye property. So data.hello should still work. So that means that console log should still give me hello world. And it does. Now if I console logged, let's do a console log of the goodbye. Okay, and that'd be like that. Let's go over here and see goodbye world, hello world. Okay. So again, what it does is it's going to import everything as an object with everything that's exported from that file. If I do that, but I don't want them as an object. I don't want to do this data. I want to just write hello. I just want to write goodbye. So a very popular thing to do is that instead you're going to destructure stuff from that object that comes in. So let's say I just want hello. I'll use destructuring syntax and just destructure hello. Because again, what this syntax does, it says, hey, you know, there's an object that's coming from here. I just want hello, so just grab hello. So now, if I do this, this will work and give me hello, but I never imported this data.goodbye, so I'm going to get an error there. See, data is not defined. But hello is cool. So now if I wanted to add goodbye, I just do this, goodbye. So now it'll destructure hello and goodbye from that object coming from data.js. Okay, and now I can do this, get rid of the data, and there you go. And then that should work. And hello world, goodbye world. So moral of the story is it just depends on how you export your files. If you do an export default, then you don't need to destructure it. It'll just export that piece of data. But you only can have one export default per file. If you're exporting it this way, you have to be deliberate about how you express how you're importing it. You can import it all as a named object, or you can destructure just what you need, which is typically what people will do. Because if you can reduce the amount of things that the browser's holding in memory, it's going to run faster. So why hold things that you don't need? Also makes your code easier to read, because I can see exactly what you're using, because you're only importing what you need. So in this case, I know what you're using, and I can look at your code. But if you port like everything every time, it's less efficient, and I don't know what you're using unless I go back and read all your other code, which makes it harder for me as a programmer to go sit there and kind of understand what your intentions are. So this allows me to write more deliberate code, one, I can break up my code into multiple files, which makes it easier to read and easier to manage. Two, it allows me to express what's going where a little bit better in a way that makes my code more readable. So this is overall a very good thing. Now, again, most people don't use, as I've seen, modules in the browser. You can, because most people, what they do is they'll use Webpack, Rollup, Parcel to bundle their JavaScript as one big file and minify it and do all this other stuff. But this is something you can do. It's a feature that's available to you. Now, people who created Node, which you might be familiar using in your backend JavaScript, those people are now creating a new tool, kind of like Node, but new, called Deno. And Deno, so Node had its own module system, because when Node came out, this module system didn't exist yet. ES6 wasn't a thing yet. So if you've used Node, you might have noticed that when you want to export something there, you do one export, and what you do is you assign what you want to export to this variable called module.exports. And then you can use the require function to pull that in from another file. That's how modules work in Node. In Deno, it's going to use this ES6 module syntax from the get-go. And then the cool thing about this is that it's not just relative URLs you can pull from. You can pull from anywhere. You could pull from like other URLs. So I could type in URLs there to have my library, and it'll just go in there and pull it in, which makes this pretty cool. So that is ES6 module syntax: exports, imports, export defaults, what it generally means, how you use it, just kind of a little bit of the history behind it. So basically, again, you have three ways to kind of bring in, on the front end code, you have two ways to bring in your JavaScript code. So I can either if I want to break it up into multiple files, I can either just do a whole bunch of script tags, which again can get complicated because what's the right order to put them in to make sure that it all works. It can get very complicated very quickly, which is why people like bundlers like Webpack and Rollup to help figure that out. But you could also use ES6 modules, which allows you to just do all these imports and exports, and then just import the file where everything starts. Now on the back end, when you're using Node, by default, Node really only has the module.exports with the require. So if you're doing back-end code, that's what you're using. But if you're doing front-end code using a Webpack rollup or parcel that runs through Node, okay, to bundle your code, then you'll be able to use the ES6 module syntax when working with Node, but it's because you're still doing front-end code. Cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say. That should do it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully this cleared up a lot of things about why you're seeing different ways to work with modules, why there's so many different ways to do this, and what are the differences. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day. Enjoy.